Chapter 241. In it together. He groaned in pain as he tried to open his eyes, but it seemed his strength failed him. His head throbbed as if a hammer had dropped on his skull, and his limbs felt sore, as if he'd been dragged on rough ground while unconscious. The pain in his head was so intense that Neil wanted to remain unconscious and not try to wake up. But then, in the haze of crumbling back into unconsciousness, he heard a faint voice beside him, followed by a familiar hand tracing his face. The hand was so soothing, and it felt real. Only his wife's touch felt like that. His heart nodded at the realization that he must be dreaming. He'd missed her so much that he didn't want to wake up from this beautiful dream where his head was lying on her lap, and her fingers were tracing his face. He could even hear her voice calling him to wake up. But how could he wake up when he knew she wasn't there? He could only feel her in his sleep, not when awake. He'd rather remain like this. "Neil, please open your eyes. You can't be here. He's going to kill you," she cried, cradling his head and stroking his hair. Neil couldn't mistake this for one of his dreams again, as he felt something wet falling on his cheeks. She was crying. The Mia in his dreams never cried but smiled and kissed him. Realizing something was off, Neil tried to open his eyes, but it was challenging with the pain in his skull. However, when he heard her cry get louder and her pleading for him to wake up more desperate, he forced himself to open his eyes. At first, his vision was blurry, and he could barely make out her face. But gradually, he saw her clearly. She was smiling through tears and staring down at him with so much relief in her expressive brown eyes that made him ache from longing. Unsure if this was a dream or reality, he gripped her hand, which was cradling his face, and pulled it to his lips. He kissed each one of her fingers with so much love and longing that his heart ached. When he saw that she didn't disappear like in most of his dreams, Neil frowned and pushed himself up. "Be careful. You have a wound on the back of your head," she said, helping him to sit up. But before she could do more, Neil had yanked her into his crushing embrace and buried his head in the crook of her neck. He hugged her so tightly, as if he feared she would disappear if he were to let go. "If this is some kind of dream, Mia, I never want to wake up from it," he whispered against her skin, his voice laced with tender longing. "By God, I'd rather remain here than wake up to a world without you. Lord, I missed you so much." He tightened his hold on her, but because of her large belly, he couldn't feel every inch of her against him. He pulled away and cupped her face in both his palms, tears streaming down her face as she placed her hands against his on her cheek. "I missed you too, Neil. I thought you were dead when they brought you in with your head bleeding. You were so still, and I got scared that you were also dead. I couldn't bear it. You." She broke down completely, her shoulders shaking uncontrollably with her sobs. Unable to take it anymore, Neil pulled her back into his embrace, and she melted into his arms and cried even more. When Owen's men had first dragged the unconscious Neil to her, with blood dripping from his head, she'd thought they'd killed him like Zephyr and had panicked, yelling at the men like a crazy woman. She'd even gotten up on her swollen feet and hit one of them with her shoes. She hadn't known how she'd done it, but she'd almost blinded one of them until they yelled that Neil was alive and just unconscious. Mia had run to his side, and when she felt his heartbeat, she was so relieved she almost passed out from it. She'd somehow managed to stop the bleeding from his head and pulled his head onto her lap for the 2 hours he was unconscious. When he started to groan, she tried to coax him into waking up by stroking his face and neck. Now that he was awake, she could barely contain her emotions, knowing Owen had left them together because he believed he was doing her a favor by letting her say her goodbyes to Neil before he'd end him. When Mia's shoulders continued to shake uncontrollably with her sobs, Neil began to realize he wasn't dreaming and that this moment was real. He raised his head and looked around the place, noticing that they were in an empty, dirty warehouse with a foul smell in the air that made one want to throw up. However, the fact that he wasn't dreaming and that his wife was really in his arms made him quickly snap back to his senses. He slightly pushed away from the hug as Mia's sobs subsided. He looked down at her tear-filled eyes and weary face and felt his heart tighten and his anger rise at the fact that Mia had been staying in a pit like this for 4 days. He stroked her cheeks and asked, "What did you mean by you thought I was dead too?" With that question, Mia was reminded of Zephyr. She covered her face with her palm and cried, shaking convulsively from the soul-crushing image of Zephyr's body this morning when the men came to drag his already decomposing body away that had left the warehouse smelling even after he was taken away. She hadn't been able to even look at the body when they were dragging it away and laughing and gagging at the smell it emitted from the infected wound. She'd felt so angry she wanted to get a gun and shoot them all in the head to shut them up for good, including Owen. They killed him, she murmured, her voice breaking as she avoided Neil's gaze guiltily. It was her fault, and she wished she'd done something before he died. Neil felt his breath hitch in his lungs. He seemed to understand what she meant, but to be sure, he asked, "Who, Mia? Who did they kill?" He used his hands to stroke her arms to soothe her. When she spoke next, it was like the words were wrenched out of her soul. "Zephyr. He's dead. They killed him." She proceeded to tell him what happened and how she'd been forced to stay in the same place with his dead body for a day before it was taken away that morning. "I'm sorry I didn't listen to you when you told me to stay at home. If I'd listened, Zephyr wouldn't have died. It was my fault." Neil could see that she truly believed it was her fault that Zephyr was no more. He pulled her back into his arms and stroked her back, assuring her, "It wasn't your fault, Mia. And I know he wouldn't want you blaming yourself for his death. I promise you, I'll give justice to Zephyr's death once I get you out of here." Then, as if Mia had been doused in cold water, she suddenly stopped crying and pushed away from his embrace. She shook her head frantically. "We can't get out together. Neil, you have to leave. You shouldn't have come here in the first place." She began to push at him, telling him to leave before it was too late, and before they get to him and kill him too. Zephyr had died because of her. She wouldn't allow her husband to die as well. "I would never be able to live if you were to die, Neil. Please go and leave me." Her panicked state showed in her quick, frantic movements as she tried to push him away. "Go, Neil, leave me. Save yourself." Neil grabbed both her wrists and calmly called her name, "Mia, listen to me." But she continued to struggle, desperately trying to push him away like a frightened cat trying to struggle out of its prey's hold. Her brown eyes were filled with so much terror Neil feared that she might hurt herself or the babies if he didn't calm her down from her hysterical state of mind. "Go, Neil, leave," she shouted, her voice hoarse with fear and desperation as she hysterically looked around to see if the men were in sight and if Owen would come out of nowhere and shoot Neil like they'd done to Zephyr. Neil called her name again, "Mia, stop." But she wasn't listening to him. She was too consumed by her fear for him to listen, and her nails were biting into his arms as she kept looking around in fear. He finally grabbed the back of her head and pulled her in for a kiss to shut her up. She struggled at first, but the moment his tongue slid against her lips, she lost the battle and melted into his demanding kiss. With a smothered moan, she leaned into him and let him part her lips. Neil had not intended the kiss to go this far, but once she stopped struggling and parted her lips for his tongue, he didn't hold back. He'd missed her terribly. He let his passion take over. His arms tightened around her, imprisoning her against his chest, while his mouth opened hungrily, his tongue plunging into her mouth and stroking against hers. He dipped his tongue in and out of her mouth with a wet fervor that made a moan tear out of her mouth and drove him insane. Lord, he'd missed her so much. He closed his teeth on her bottom lips and sucked on it to soothe the pain while his hands shifted restlessly over the sides of her breasts. Her body automatically arched against him, and she moaned into his kiss as her arms wrapped around his neck and kissed him back with the same intensity until they were both on fire. When Neil saw that she was calm, and that the kiss was getting more intense than he'd intended, he reluctantly dragged his mouth from hers, breathing heavily with his forehead resting against hers. He whispered huskily, "I'd rather die than leave you here. Nothing would make me leave this place without you." Mia's tears streamed down her flushed and breathless face as she stared at him. "But, Neil," he placed a finger on her lips to silence her. "We'll get out of here together, Mia. I promise. I won't let anything happen to you." He kissed her forehead, holding her close, his determination growing stronger with each passing second. "We're in this together. Always." Chapter 242 Her Babies. After Mia was finally calmed and was leaning on him for support after their intense kiss, Neil gently slid his hand down and placed it over her bulging belly, stroking it tenderly as he asked, "Are the babies all right?" Mia placed her hand over his and nodded, though her eyes were filled with worry. "They're fine, but I fear not for long. They don't kick or move much like they used to," she informed him. She'd noticed a day ago that her babies, who usually moved and kicked a lot, were unusually silent in her belly. She hadn't felt them move even a single bit, and it would have scared her even more if she hadn't finally felt a little movement this morning. Neil's heart clenched at her words, and he poked his index finger at the side of her stomach, frowning as if he were searching or waiting for something to happen. "What are you doing?" Mia asked when she felt his finger pressing lightly to the side of her stomach, and his brows furrowed in concentration. "Trying to feel them," he said, then proceeded to explain when she gave him a questioning look. "One of them usually kicks from this side every time I touch you like this, but I don't feel his movement now." "Can you walk?" Neil asked as he began to stand up. "We'll see a doctor as soon as I get you out of here," he assured her, his voice firm with determination. She nodded at his question, indicating she could walk. But when she began to stand, she grimaced as if in pain and fell back down. "Your feet are swollen," Neil exclaimed, almost sounding as hurt as she was as he noticed her feet. Now that he looked closely, she was in a worse condition than when he'd last seen her. Her plain blue gown had been torn at the hem, and her skin and face looked so dull it gnawed at his nerves and made him see red. He could feel his blood heating up in his veins as rage began to consume him. A rage like never before. He wanted nothing but to kill whoever was responsible. But before he could act on his plans and let his temper take control of him, his wife had to get to safety first. "Don't try to stand, I'll carry you," he said quickly when she tried to stand up again. "I'll slow you down if you were to carry me," Mia reasoned, as she could still feel herself shaking in fear that someone would come out to stop them and attack Neil. "I don't care. I'm not going to have you walk on feet like that and make it worse. Your ankles are all swollen," he remarked grimly, and not giving her the chance to argue, as he knew they had to leave before the people in charge showed up, he began to bend down, intending to carry her. But the moment he stood up with her in his arms, they heard a laughing voice. "Nice try, Wayner," the voice said, clapping slowly. "That was one intense kiss you two just shared. I'll make sure you pay for daring to kiss my woman like that, without shame, right under my property." He sneered in angry disgust. He'd been watching them through the cameras he'd installed in the warehouse to keep an eye on them. He'd been kind enough to allow them a few hours of their last time together, but he'd been enraged to watch the fucker kiss his woman like that. He'd left his car and came in to stop them and get on with his plans. Neil's blood ran cold as he turned to the familiar voice, still holding Mia in his arms. His shock was evident as he realized the person behind Mia's kidnapping was none other than Owen Sullivan. Not once had he suspected Owen because he believed the man would never do such a thing to the woman he claimed to love from childhood. But then he'd been heartless enough to hit her and try to force himself on her when Neil was still in hiding, so why wouldn't he resort to kidnapping? He should have known better that Owen Sullivan was capable of anything after hitting Mia. And the fact that he hadn't suspected the bastard and gotten his men to track him sooner made Neil feel angry at himself and at Owen for putting Mia through all this trouble in her condition. "You've got some nerve, Sullivan," Neil gritted through clenched teeth. Owen stepped forward, a smug smile playing on his lips as he looked at the couple. "Surprised, Wayner? You shouldn't be. You always knew I'd come back for what's mine." Neil's grip tightened around Mia protectively. "You are a delusional fool, Sullivan. Mia's not yours and never will be, and the sooner you accept that, the better it will be for you." Owen's smile widened, his blue eyes glinting with malice. "Oh, but she was, Wayner. Long before you ever came into the picture. And she will be again. Don't give me the bullshit that you knew her before me. You don't. She's not your little childhood sweetheart, but mine. And I intend to have her back once I kill you today." Mia clung to Neil, panic already setting in at the mention of killing Neil. "Owen, please, let him go. You don't have to do this. You." "Shut up, my sweet," Owen snapped, his voice turning cold. "You should be grateful I haven't killed him yet and even gave you some hours to be together. But don't worry, I will. And then you'll see who truly cares about you. You don't have to worry about that burden in your stomach. My doctors will be here in 3 days to get that thing out of you. You won't feel any pain at all." Neil's rage boiled over at those words, his eyes darkening with fury as he tightened his hold around his trembling wife. His gray eyes were as cold as steel and murderous enough to make any man shiver as he gritted through clenched teeth. "Lay a hand on her, and I'll kill you along with your fucking doctors, Sullivan. I swear it." Owen wasn't one bit shaken by Neil's threat nor his murderous glare as he knew he had the upper hand with hundreds of his men surrounding the building at the moment. If he were alone, those silver killer eyes would have made him think twice about crossing him, as he could still recall how the psycho had easily broken his arm like a piece of stick. And he intended to also do the same to him today before killing him. He laughed, a chilling sound that echoed through the warehouse. "Big words, Wayner, but you're in no position to make threats. You must be so confident because you believe your men are on their way here to trap me." He chuckled, a smug smile playing on his lips as he continued, "Let me burst your bubble, General Wayner. Your soldiers will never find you here. You yourself have no idea where this building is, and neither do your men. I knew you'd pull some strings on me, so I was extra careful in luring you here." Neil heard that and knew immediately that the bastard had found out his plan to have his men track his movement through a GPS tracker he'd planted in his car and his wallet. His plan had been to come here ahead and make Mia's kidnapper believe he was alone. Then, minutes later, his soldiers, who had been tracking his movement, would know where to come and assist him, with one of his cars arranged to take Mia away first. If his plan had worked, his men should have been here by now. But from the smugness in Owen's eyes, Neil knew Owen had outsmarted him. "From that look on your face, I assume I've ruined your plans," Owen chuckled. "I'm no fool, Wayner. When I asked you to drive to Silverbrook, you didn't believe I was stupid enough to give you my exact location, did you? Now, put my love down. It's time we end this." Neil knew he'd overlooked his wife's kidnapper's plan because he hadn't expected the person to be Owen, and he knew there was no way he'd be able to leave this place without the help of his soldiers, with so many men standing behind Owen. But he stood his ground, holding Mia close in a protective way and glaring at Owen with his silver eyes. "You have to kill me first before I let you have my wife." "Have it your way," Owen said, his smile fading into a dangerous expression. He signaled to his men, who stepped forward, guns drawn. Mia's eyes widened in fear as she saw the guns pointed toward Neil. She had never been a fan of guns, as they brought back terrible memories from a past that could never be forgotten. She had become even more terrified of them after Zephyr had died from one. She couldn't help herself from trembling at the fear that she could lose Neil as well. Even though he didn't seem to flinch or look frightened in the face of danger, Mia was terrified. "Please, Owen, don't do this. Did you think that by killing my husband and my unborn child, you could ever make me love you if you force me to stay with you? I'd rather die along with them." Owen smirked, "as if you'd have a choice but to stay with me. You won't even remember your name or Wayner's after I'm done with you. You'll only see me as your husband and savior. How do you plan to make her do that?" Neil asked Owen to stall for time, calculating his options for escape without getting hit by a bullet. He already knew how Owen planned to do that. He'd do the same thing her birth mother had done to her to make her forget about her terrible memories. He'd tamper with her brain and memories again. But Neil will never allow that. Never. "Ha, Wayner, you never fail to amuse me. But since today will be your last day on Earth, I'll tell you everything. From what I've learned, you are now aware of the reason behind Mia's memory loss and who her father is. Am I wrong?" He smirked when he noticed the confused frown on Mia's face and the angry look Neil shot at him. "What's he talking about, Neil?" Mia asked, confused. Her father? She'd been told he was dead, so who was this Owen talking about? "Don't listen to him. He's a damned liar." Neil gritted, praying Mia would not let Owen's words get to her. The last thing he wanted was for her to go through pain or even know about Calvin's existence. "Am I, Wayner? Haven't you told her about her father being alive? And here I thought you loved her." Chapter 243 Trust. "Am I, Wayner? Haven't you told her about her father being alive? And here I thought you loved her," Owen said with a smug smile as he suddenly realized he could twist the truth and make Mia see Neil as a liar who'd kept her away from her family, knowing how much she longed to know who her father was. He would so much enjoy seeing them fight before their separation. Knowing how Mia was, she would definitely believe him if he told her how her father loved her and was looking for her. With those thoughts, Owen continued to speak with fake sympathy. "Wayner, how could you keep her in the dark? You know well enough how much her father has been searching for her, and yet you didn't tell her about it. Her father is alive, and if you hadn't destroyed his business, he'd still be a healthy man right now and not lying on his sick bed, on the verge of death." Mia felt her heart drop to her stomach at those words. Her father was alive all this while, and Neil knew it and didn't tell her about it? She glanced at her husband and noticed how his jaw was clenched tightly as he stared at Owen like he'd murder him. He was so angry she could feel the heat of rage emitting from him. His eyes were so dark, they blazed with an intensity that could have set the whole warehouse on fire. Neil's muscles tensed up, veins popping in his neck as his rage boiled over. He wanted nothing more than to throttle Owen with his bare hands, to wipe that smug grin off his face forever. The heat of his anger radiated off him in waves, filling the air with an almost palpable tension. His jaw clenched so tightly it looked as if it might shatter, and his eyes were dark, stormy pools of fury, flames of rage flickering in them that made Mia shiver a little in his arms. "You claim to love her, but you are killing her father behind her back and keeping her away from the only family she has," Owen continued as he noticed the look of betrayal in Mia's eyes as she stared at Wayner. "Yes, get angry and blame him for destroying your life," Owen thought as he watched his words take effect on the couple. Mia stared at Neil's angry face. He wasn't even looking at her but at Owen. His grip on her had become so tight she could feel pain under her knees. She stared at his clenched jaw, and then she did something that surprised Neil, who thought she believed what Owen was telling her. She raised her hand and spread her fingers against his clenched jaw. She caressed his cheek and forced him to look down at her. "Neil," she called softly. When he looked down at her, his expression quickly took a 60-degree turn from his rage to tenderness and warmth. The overwhelming presence around him immediately subsided like flames getting extinguished by water. "Is he telling the truth? I will only believe anything you tell me, not him. If my father is indeed alive, why did you keep it away from me?" she asked, stroking his cheek and looking up at his gaze. She knew Owen was just like a devil who plants seeds of doubt in one's heart, and the last thing she'd do was believe him over Neil. If Neil didn't tell her about her father, there must be a reason for it. Anyway, even her mother, Elizabeth, didn't tell her about him, which meant something was off. So why should she blame Neil for keeping it away from her? Neil looked down at his wife with love in his eyes. For a moment, when she went stiff in his arms, he'd thought she'd believed Owen and thought of him as a traitor who'd hurt her father, but the look she had in her eyes now was nothing but love and trust. She'd only believe anything he told her, whether it was the truth or a lie, because she loved him. He knew it and could feel it. He couldn't ask for more in life than a woman like her, and he leaned into her caress to bask in her love and warmth as he replied. "I didn't tell you because he is not worthy of you. He did terrible things to you that are not worth remembering. You don't need him in your life. He is a monster, and Owen is becoming just like him," he whispered, kissing her palm. "Don't let him get into your head. You have no father, and don't bother trying to remember him. I'll explain more to you once we leave here. Okay?" Mia nodded, okay, believing him and hardening her heart to not let herself take Owen's words for the truth in any way. She'd believe anything Neil said 1,000,000 times over anyone, and she trusted him about her father being a monster. Though she'd only had faint memories of her past flashing into her mind, she could still remember one certain one that always gripped her unexpectedly. She remembered calling a man father, but instead of showing her love, he'd hit her twice on the face. She hadn't been able to see his face, but she'd forever remember the pain of his rejection, which she'd always thought was her mind playing tricks. But now it was clear that man who'd hit her was indeed her father. Mia felt her heart tighten, and she clenched her fingers around Neil's shirt to control her emotions. She'd rather hold on to the belief that her father was dead and he loved her, rather than accept the cruel man in her faint memories as her father. And now that she'd confirmed he was her father, she didn't want to remember him more than she already had, nor have anything to do with him. Some things were better off unremembered and forgotten, just like her childhood memories that had been lost. She had her own family now, Neil and her unborn children. "Are you all right?" Neil whispered when he noticed her dejected expression. He wished as hell she hadn't been told about Kelvin and that he could kiss her and make her forget, but he knew better than to do that when they were still in the mouth of danger with Owen looking at them in anticipation as if waiting for the part where they'd fight each other. "I'm fine," she said, forcing a smile to assure him. Owen, who was waiting for the drama to happen and hear them arguing, was taken aback to see and hear them whispering to each other like he wasn't there with armed men. Did they think they were invisible, or were they just ignoring him and whispering to each other to annoy the hell out of him? What were they whispering to each other, and why wasn't Mia demanding for answers? "Mia, aren't you going to ask about who your father is and what Wayner did to him?" he said, displeased that none of the things he'd envisioned were happening. "I don't want to know about him, and whatever Neil did to him, he must have deserved it. I don't have a father, and you can give up trying to make me believe I had one who loved me, Owen. Just like you, my father is dead to me." Owen's expression immediately turned hurt at that. He felt a stabbing pain in his heart, a pain of her repeated rejection and betrayal gripped him until he felt he'd suffocate from it. Laughing humorlessly, he said, "Do you have any idea what I've done to make you mine, Mia?" Do you know what I've sacrificed for you? Why can't you see that nobody can love you like I do? Why? He yelled like a maniac, his voice bouncing over the walls. Mia's eyes hardened, and she wiggled out of Neil's arms until he let her go, and she stood on her feet and faced Owen, standing protectively in front of her husband. Stop this and let us go, Owen. The boy I knew in the past would never put me in pain. I'm in pain, Owen, and it would hurt me more than anything if you were to hurt my husband. Please, let this go, she said softly, almost sounding pleading. Owen's face twisted with anguish. Do you have any idea what you were asking me to do, Mia? You were asking a hell of a lot. I can never let you go with that fucker. As Owen continued his rant, Neil wrapped an arm around Mia's waist and pulled her back until her back was against his front and whispered into her ear, his lips barely moving. I'm going to attack the man standing closer to us to take his gun, and once I do, find your way behind the pillar behind me and hide. I need to fight to make a way for us. Mia wanted to argue, but she couldn't speak here as none of Owen's men, nor Owen himself, noticed Neil's whispered instructions. She placed her hand against his on her waist to silently tell him to be careful and not get hurt or shot. He seemed to understand her because he stroked her belly twice in acknowledgement. Owen continued his ranting without noticing the couple's exchange as he was too angry to pay attention, his voice growing more desperate. I've never wanted something so badly as I want you, Mia. I'd rather see you with no one than not have you myself. Mia gave a barely perceptible nod, ready to follow Neil's plan. Neil slowly moved her behind him, his eyes never leaving Owen's as the idiot continued to rant on. The moment Mia rushed safely behind the pillar, only 3 steps away from where they stood, Neil's focus sharpened, his body coiling with the readiness of a predator as he moved at a speed that caught everyone off guard. Owen, realizing too late what was happening, shouted, "Stop him!" But Neil was already moving, a blur of motion as he took down the first man who lunged at him and took his weapon. He then used the man as a shield in front of him as he began to shoot the rest down. Gunfire erupted in the warehouse, the noise deafening. Neil fought with a ferocity driven by love and desperation, his every move calculated to protect Mia, who sat in the corner with her hands pressed against her ears. She hated the sounds of guns and the sight of them, but knowing her husband was fighting amidst hundreds of men, she crawled to the side of the pillar and peeked her head out to watch. She watched as he moved effortlessly and fought the men, striking them before they even realized his movement. Stay down, Mia, Neil shouted, his voice cutting through the noise as he caught sight of her peeking out of the pillar. Owen, who was also hiding behind another pillar to avoid being shot at by the psycho who was fighting off his men so effortlessly like they were some amateur assassins when in truth they were skilled men from the underworld, noticed Mia in the other pillar. He couldn't dare step out knowing Wayner would shoot him, and he couldn't fight him. Thus, he took out a gun from his pants and crawled towards the other pillar Mia was hiding at, peeking out to watch Neil. He walked up behind her and grabbed her by the arm and yanked her up, pointing the gun at her head before she could even react. Mia stiffened when she felt the gun placed on her head and heard Owen say, "I guess you are the only means of stopping that maniac." He said then yelled at the top of his voice over the sounds of the guns so Neil could hear him, "Wayner, stop your craziness right now, or I swear I will blow off Mia's head." Those words did it. Neil froze in the process of shooting another man. Chapter 244 Not Love. Those words did it. Neil froze in the process of shooting another man. He turned slowly towards the direction where Mia stood, with Owen holding her at gunpoint. His blue eyes savagely dared Neil to take another step, promising he would shoot Mia. Neil felt his blood run cold at the sight. He immediately tried to move forward to attack Owen, but Owen fastened the gun's chamber and said, "If I were you, I'd think twice. I am not like you. I won't hesitate to shoot Mia to her death and then kill you. Tisk, you better drop that gun right this instant if you want to keep her alive." He warned, meaning every single word he spoke as he used the tip of the gun to stroke Mia's neck and leaned down to sniff her hair that still held the sweet scent of her signature jasmine fragrance that Owen always liked and would dream of basking in at night. He pressed his lips on her neck and felt Mia stiffen and shiver in his arms. And he mistook her shivering for pleasure. "I don't want to do this, Mia. So stay still and don't make me shoot you," he whispered to the shivering Mia. She wasn't shivering because she was scared of the gun or death, but because she was angry. She was shaking from anger and hate and disgust. His mere kiss repulsed her and made her skin crawl. She wanted to kick him and move away from his grip, but she knew he was manic and could pull the trigger. She feared not for herself but for her unborn children. She wanted to live for them and Neil, so she didn't make any movement and only swallowed her rage and clenched her fists. I said, "Drop the FC King gun, or I'll FC King shoot her." Owen yelled like a madman, spitting in anger as Neil remained holding the gun and glaring at him like he'd shoot at any time. At first, Neil thought Owen would never shoot Mia. Someone who loved her would never hurt the person he loved. He could never do that to her, and he believed if Owen indeed loved her as he claimed, he wouldn't. Thus, Neil didn't drop the gun and continued to calculate with his eyes how to get there, grab the gun out of Owen's grip, and take back his wife. However, Owen surprised him by pulling out a pocket knife from his trousers. The knife's blade glimmered under the light of the warehouse as he looked at Neil manically and warned. "Drop the gun, Wayner. This is going to be my last warning to you." He placed the knife at the side of Mia's stomach, and when Neil didn't drop the gun, he made a deep cut on the side of her stomach that made Mia cry out in pain and almost fall to her knees. Owen's hold around her was so tight it was crushing the breath out of her as she felt something warm begin to soak her gown. Blood drained immediately from Neil's face as he watched the crimson blood soak the side of Mia's dress. He'd thought Owen would never hurt her and was just trying to make him drop his weapon. But seeing the blood and looking at his wife's pained expression, Neil lost it. He was about to run forward and attack Owen, but seeing him raise the knife again, he froze in place and automatically dropped the gun without being told again. "Good decision, Wayner." Owen smirked in satisfaction as he saw Neil drop the gun. He'd hate to hurt Mia again because of Wayner's stubbornness. He didn't want to hurt her, but to save his own life, he'd have to hurt her and treat the wounds later. After all, his doctors would still cut her open to remove the child when they arrived in 3 days. "Don't you dare hurt her again, you crazy *T. Neil gritted through clenched teeth as he watched the pain on Mia's face and the blood on her dress. His heart clenched tightly in his chest with fear and anger. It was his fault. He should have known this psychopath had no idea what love was. When you love someone, you'd never hurt them or be able to see them in pain. Owen had no idea that what he felt for Mia was just a crazy obsession, not love. He wanted her but didn't love her. Realizing that, Neil felt angry at himself for even hesitating to drop the gun, and now Mia was in pain and losing blood because of him. "Let her go and I'll do whatever the FCK you want," Neil said slowly, his clenched hands coming unclenched at his side as he stared at Owen, avoiding Mia's pained expression. Owen smirked, relishing the moment more than he should. He knew he should kill Wayner now and whisk Mia away to the house he'd prepared to keep her until his doctors arrived, but how could he miss such a golden opportunity to see Wayner's pride and arrogance broken into pieces before his death? He'd be a fool to let this slip away, and so he whispered soothingly into Mia's ear as he felt her trembling in pain. "Don't worry, the pain will soon go away, my love. It's Wayner's fault that I cut you. I will make him pay for that. Relax and watch him suffer. You need an asylum, you are completely crazy." Mia rebuked angrily. "You cut me and dare blame it on my husband. Let me go. I hate you with every fiber in me. Yes, I am crazy, but only for you, my sweet," he chuckled, enjoying her little struggles. Women, he thought in amusement, would never admit they like one's touch or attention, and no matter what, he refused to believe Mia didn't love him or didn't like his touch. She loved him, and her love would bloom once Wayner was out of their lives. "You are hurting her, damn it. Let her go, and I'll do whatever you want." Neil yelled in angry frustration as he watched Owen manhandle his wife like a toy. The more she struggled in his grip, the more he seemed to enjoy it, and that, Neil could never bear to watch. He wanted so badly to be in front of the bastard and squeeze the life out of him, but he couldn't because he'd never risk Mia's life to kill Owen. "You'd do anything, right?" Owen raised a brow in amusement. "Then go down on your knees and apologize to me for everything you've ever done to disrespect me. Apologize for being the reason behind my university suspension 5 years ago. Apologize for destroying my company and breaking my arm. I want you to FC King apologize and make it seem sincere, or, I swear, I will cut her with every mistake or reluctance." He spat angrily, remembering how Xavier Galvera had destroyed his education years ago and ruined his opportunity of graduating and being a good person like his silly, late, optimistic mother had wanted him to be. He'd have never turned to Rodrigo if Xavier, who turned out to be this FCKER, hadn't ruined his life. Neil clenched his fists. He was a prideful man who would never lower himself by going down on his knees for someone as stupid as Owen, but when he looked at his wife and saw her shaking her head from side to side, silently begging him not to do it, he felt there was no use in holding on to a pride that would cost his wife's life. Without her in this world, nothing else would make sense in his life again. Who was he without the girl who'd looked at him with innocent little eyes years ago? Who was he without the girl who'd become the main source of his breath, his soul, his wholeness? Who was he in a world without her? Her slight pain caused him the agony of a million cuts. Her love soothed him like sweet nectar. He was whole with her but broken and shattered without her. Who was he without Mia? He was absolutely nothing but an empty shell of a being. His pride meant nothing when it came to her, and he'd do anything to keep her from suffering another injury. "Neil, don't do it," Mia pleaded, her voice trembling with anger and pain. She wished she had no pregnancy to consider. She wished she could throw caution to the wind and use her martial arts skills to kick and take the gun away from him, but she had 2 souls in her womb to consider and a husband who would risk anything to see that she was safe, who would let go of his pride to stop her suffering. If her 13-year-old self was told that Owen would turn out to be the reason she'd be in so much pain today, she wouldn't have believed it. "Don't go on your knees for him, Neil," she whispered anguishingly as she saw the remorse in his gray eyes as he stared at the blood at the side of her dress. Neil ignored her and only gave her a reassuring smile that he'd do anything for her. To everyone's astonishment, Neil Wayner dropped down to his knees. It happened in slow motion, making Mia's eyes burn with tears at the sight of her husband going down on his knees to apologize to someone like Owen. With a voice devoid of any emotions, Neil opened his mouth and said, "I apologize for all the things I've done to you, which I thought you deserved, but because you are holding my wife, I beg your forgiveness, Mr. Sullivan." Despite the fact that he was apologizing on his knees, he did it in his own way that didn't reduce his class. There was still an air of dignity around him, a silent strength that spoke volumes even in this humiliating position. His eyes were as emotionless and as dark as a gloomy sky. One thing was for sure, no matter what Owen made him do, he could never change the fact that Neil Wayner was more superior than him in everything. "Now, let her go. You've gotten what you wanted," he said, his voice still holding the same detached tone. Despite the apologies and getting what he wanted, Owen still didn't feel any satisfaction from it because Neil didn't look one bit defeated. He was the one kneeling, but Owen felt like the one being humiliated. His grip tightened around the edge of his pocket knife, then he signaled his men forward. Mia watched in horror as men with thick sticks circled Neil. "What do you think you're doing? He apologized to you already," she yelled at him, grimacing in pain when the wound on her side suddenly burned. Owen ignored her, and with his orders, his men began to hit Neil from different angles. Neil grunted in pain but remained on his knees, refusing to fight back while Mia was still in Owen's grip. He refused to be the reason for her pain again, she'd suffered enough. Owen watched with satisfaction, his smile widening. "My forgiveness doesn't come easily, Wayner. You'll have to earn it." Each blow landed with sickening force, and Mia's heart shattered with every hit. "Stop it. Please, stop it. You're killing him," she screamed, her voice breaking with desperation and anguish as blood began to roll out of his mouth and nose with the hits. Neil's vision blurred from the pain, but he focused on Mia, drawing strength from the sight of her as she struggled in Owen's grip. He knew from the blows and the pain in his head that he might lose consciousness, but he fought it and tried to stand on his feet. Another blow to his neck brought him down again, and he grunted. Owen handed Mia to one of his men, then walked closer to Neil, who was fighting to stay conscious. He made sure to stand 3 feet away, fearing Neil might suddenly attack him. Owen raised his gun directly to Neil's head, his voice low and taunting. "How does it feel, Wayner? To be brought to your knees, to be broken? Do you know what will happen once I kill you?" he asked. "I will own everything that ever belonged to you, including your wife. Your properties and company. Everything will be mine. Any last words, Wayner?" he asked, readying his gun. "Please, don't," Mia exclaimed as Owen raised the gun to Neil. But before she could do more than scream, the gun went off. Chapter 245 Gunshot. The sky was filled with countless stars that sparkled against the ebony night, with a crescent moon that reminded the girl standing at the window of her room of a half-moon cake given to her by her twin sister days ago. Her pink dress was still covered in mud from her crawl to the neighboring estate to get the puppy for the gray-eyed boy to whom she had promised it. Her brown eyes glimmered with a loneliness that shouldn't be found in the eyes of a girl her age. Her little mouth was set in a slight pout as she absent-mindedly dug her nails into her palm, injuring herself but not feeling the pain after the housekeeper had scolded her upon her return. She didn't know why, but she loved looking at the night sky because it always made her happy. But today, as she looked up at it, she couldn't find that little happiness because she knew her twin sister was with the gray-eyed boy. She wondered what they were doing and if he was still angry with her for taking the puppy. But as if on cue, she heard the door of her room bang open and heard footsteps approaching. The girl didn't turn around to see who it was. Her emotionless, lonely eyes remained on the sky. She didn't move until she felt a small hand grab hers and swirl her around. At first, when the girl saw that the person who had grabbed her was her twin sister, her brown eyes momentarily brightened. She knew her sister never failed to visit her at night with lots of chocolate and sweets she had hidden during the day. However, instead of the usual bright smile and a hand filled with chocolates, she was met with her twin sister's angry face and darkened brown eyes. Sometimes it terrified her to see a face like hers in front of her, but she had come to get used to it after her sister did everything to make her feel less lonely and unwanted in the house. "Mari, you came," said the girl. Despite trying to keep her face emotionless as usual, she couldn't hide the little happiness she felt at the sight of her sister. But as she was about to reach out and pull her sister to their playroom so they could play before their father returned, the girl was surprised when Mariana moved away to avoid her touch and instead pushed her. The girl fell to the floor, her backside hitting the ground with a little more force and causing her pain, but she had become so immune to such pain that she didn't cry out. She didn't even flinch and only stared at her twin sister in disbelief. "Mari," she whispered softly, her voice slightly shaking. Her sister had never hurt her or pushed her away. Though their father didn't like her, her mother and sister loved her so much. "Don't call me that, you pig!" yelled Mariana as she glared down at her backstabbing sister who wanted to steal her best friend. "I thought we were friends and that you would never take what's mine, but why did you go to Xavier and try to give him a puppy?" Mariana had gone to play with her best friend when she saw him ignoring her and telling her to go home. She'd been so hurt by his actions until she realized he was angry because he believed she had been reckless by taking a puppy from its mother. She'd tried to explain that it wasn't her, but he wouldn't listen and scolded her. She'd known immediately that it was her sister he was talking about, and what made Mariana even angrier was the fact that, after a while, Xavier had told her that even though he liked her more for being daring, he didn't want her to do that for him again. He liked her sister more? No way. She was the one he knew, not her nameless sister, who she thought would never try to take her place. She'd felt threatened when he said that, and now she was here to set some boundaries. "I wanted to give it to him because he deserves a new one. He loves dogs, and I will give him one every day," the girl murmured softly as she stared up at her twin from the floor. "Why are you angry, Mari? I didn't take anything of yours. That boy is not yours." Those words had gotten to Mariana so much that she didn't care what would happen to her sister. She picked up her shoe and began to hit her with it while yelling like a little maniac. "How could you betray me after I gave you my chocolates and sweets? I hate you. Father was right. You are a thief who will steal my mother and everything I love away from me. He warned me never to like you, and I should have listened." She continued to hit her sister, who didn't bother fighting back even though she'd gotten injured by the hits and was bleeding as a pin on the shoe grazed her skin. Because the little girl's room was so far away from the other rooms, nobody heard Mariana screaming in rage as she continued to hit her sister, who didn't make a sound. A tear rolled down the little girl's cheek. However, it wasn't because of the pain from the hits but because of the pain in her heart, a pain that came from the realization that she'd lost her sister's love as well. She didn't know what it was, but her heart tightened, and she clenched her fists, not bothering to move away from the hits, believing perhaps her sister would feel good after hitting her. Though the little girl wanted to tell her twin that she'd met Xavier first, she didn't say it and closed her eyes. Mariana didn't stop hitting her until she saw how she had injured her own hands in the process of her outburst. She moved back and glared at her bleeding sister with so much hate that shouldn't have been there in the first place. A satisfied smile graced her mouth as she saw how badly she had injured her twin. "If I ever catch you with Xavier, I will beat you with anything I find until you learn to stay away from my things. And don't ever let me catch you singing our song." The little girl had been in pain the whole night, and when her mother came to kiss her goodnight, she saw the bruises on her body and asked who did this to her. Because she didn't want to get her sister into trouble, she simply said, "I fell down when I was taking off my dress." That night, her mother had looked suspicious but had not said anything and helped her clean up and get into bed. The little girl knew she should not anger her sister anymore by seeking out the gray-eyed boy, but she couldn't help it. She continued to practice the song he taught her sister, and whenever Mariana caught her playing the guitar, she'd drag her back into her room and give her the same beating as that night. It happened repeatedly, almost every night, until the girl could no longer take it or keep lying to her mother about how she got the bruises on her body. The sister she'd once loved now became the very thing she wanted to get rid of. The little girl could no longer take it anymore. She stopped sneaking out to see the gray-eyed boy, but it seemed her twin would never stop hurting her. From all that had happened lately, the little girl began to turn into something else. One night, when her twin came into her room with a heel this time to cause her pain, the little girl was already waiting for her at the door. The moment Mariana entered, she whacked her in the head with a pan she'd taken from the kitchen earlier that day. Mariana passed out, and the little girl sat there staring at her unconscious body until their housekeeper, who was searching for Mariana, somehow came into the room. The housekeeper panicked at first, but when she saw the pan in the little girl's hand, she got so mad that she grabbed the girl and began to spank her on the backside while saying, "You have become so nasty these days. Your father has told me to beat you if you act stupid. Look what you did to your sister. You are a black seed. A curse to your family." Hearing the insult her father always used whenever he took her to those wicked people in white, the little girl felt fear and started to run for the door. But the housekeeper mistook her run for trying to escape punishment and went after her. The girl ran to the kitchen, trembling in fear as she believed they'd take her to the men again because of what she did to her sister. When she saw the housekeeper come after her, she instinctively grabbed a knife on the cabinet, and when the housekeeper tried to grab her, she used the knife impulsively to defend herself. Everything happened so quickly, and before she knew it, the housekeeper had fallen to the floor, lying in a pool of her blood. Hours later, when her father and mother returned home, the entire house was silent. The girl had been locked in her room as the other housekeepers feared she might harm another person. As she curled up in the corner of her room, rocking herself back and forth and whispering, "I am sorry, Mari. I am sorry, Miss Charlotte. I didn't mean to," the door to her room banged open, and her angry father strode in with a long whip. She could see how furious he was by the flush on his face, but she didn't run to avoid him. When he came to grab her arm, she believed she had committed a crime and would be punished for it. "You little devil! How dare you hit my baby? When I'm done with you today, you'll FC King tell me where you learned to knock people out and stab them." He roughly grabbed her by the collar, but her mother rushed in and stepped forward to pull her back from him. "Let her go. She didn't stab her on purpose, it was a mistake. You can't punish her for a crime that was committed in the heat of the moment. Stay away from this, Ella. This little devil needs to be taught a damned lesson." Her mother couldn't stop her punishment that night, and when her father was done, she could barely leave her room the next day as her legs were swollen. She didn't cry despite the pain, but when Mariana came in to taunt her, she forgot about her pain and acted impulsively again. Mariana walked in to purposely show her the things Xavier had given her and also made fun of her by calling her Black Seed. "Father said you were a black seed from him, and that a black seed should never be allowed to be his child. Xavier promised to marry me when he grows older. Today, he swore to protect me and be my husband when we've come of age, and you will forever be Dad's black seed." The little girl got so angry and swore to do the same thing she did to the housekeeper to her sister. She waited until the next day when her twin was being taken to a park by their nanny. She sneaked after them with a large nail in her pocket and hid in the back seat of the limo, remaining quiet. When they arrived at the park, she followed her sister around until she got an opportunity to attack. She attacked her sister when their nanny wasn't there, using her strength to keep her down. Despite her bruised body and swollen legs, the girl's strength surprised Mariana, who looked up at her emotionless face in horror. She pressed Mariana's hand to the ground and used a big stone to nail her hand to the ground. The girl watched her sister scream and bleed with a blank expression until the nanny rushed to them. This time, her next punishment was so severe that it left her broken forever. She was locked in a room without food or water, and then suddenly, one night, she heard screams in the house and the door opened and her mother rushed in. "Oh, my dear, let's go. I'm taking you out of here. We have to leave before your father catches us." She hurriedly grabbed the girl and began to pull her away. But as if remembering something, Her mother stopped and said, "Stay right here, don't move. I will go get something from my room." Then she left her alone. However, the sound of a gunshot made her jump, and she hurried to follow the sound. There she found her father standing outside the house, holding a gun to a man's head, a man she recognized as Xavier's father. The gun went off in Mia's head at the same time the gun in the warehouse resounded in her brain, and an agonizing scream tore out of her throat at the thought that Neil had been shot just like his father had been.